Hello and welcome to my channel. In this tutorial I'm going to explain loops in C#. There are four types of loops in C# that we use. For loop, which is quite popular in almost all programming languages. For each loop, which is also quite common in many programming languages, is just used differently in different languages. And the other two popular loops we have while and do while loops. All these four loops sometimes they could be used in for the same purpose, but they have differences. In this video, we're going to look at the first two loops, for loop and for each loop. So for loop is comparatively more powerful than for each loop. For loop has quite a number of features by adding, removing elements from a data structure like array or list or dictionary. While for each loop is only used to retrieve some items from a collection like an array or list or dictionary. Another difference is that the for loop works by index. It looks for the index of the elements to retrieve them, while for each loop it works by values. So in a data collection, for each goes get the value and retrieve it. So I'm going to demonstrate this difference between these two loops in this video. So let's have a look, and please open your Visual Studio to write some code. So here is my Visual Studio, and I'm going to open a new project. And I can choose this one, or maybe just stick to the .NET. A slightly difference in the interfaces, but not a big difference. So I'm going to name it for each loops. So I'm going to name this, and it will be stored in my C# programming folder. Let's have a look. Okay, so asking me to sign in. I'll do that later. Right, you can sign into Visual Studio with any Outlook Microsoft account. So this is again that basic program that we have with those built-in libraries and functions. I don't think I'm going to use these in this tutorial. So that's our main method, our class program, and this is our namespace or project name. Now to demonstrate this for loop, let's write some comment here. The for loops. Okay, and then I'm going to write here for int I equal to 0. I is less than, let's say, 10. I plus plus. So this loop is going to run from 0 to 9 times, 10 times, as you can see. If I want to run it from 0 to 10 times, then I just need to put this here, less than or equal, so I should put it here. Then it will run 11 times, but I don't need to run it 11 times. I'm going to run it only 10 times. So it's going to run, a loop will run 10 times from 0 to 9. Oh, okay. So what I'm going to print here, I'm just going to print here what is the value of I. The value of I in this loop is this. So what happens when it runs the first time, the I value is 0, so it will print 0. In the next loop, the I value is incremented by 1, so it will print 1. In the next loop 2, in the next loop 3, 4, and so on. So let's have a look, run this program now. As you can see, I'm trying to run this from 0 to 9 times. And I want just this to print the value of I. Right, and because I'm not using the other one, so I need to hold this screen for myself. Sorry. Console.read key. Okay, so this will hold the screen for me. Okay, as you can see here, it prints all the values from 0 to 9 for me. This was just to demonstrate how the for loop works. And actually, I'm going to use this for retrieving a number of items from the array. So what is an array? Let's say array of some numbers. So if I store, let's say, int number equal to 9, so it's just a simple variable number, and the value 9 is stored, and the type is integer. But if I want to store more than one numbers, in that case, I have to declare this as an array. And to declare this an array, I'm going to use this sign here, this bracket sign here. Right, so int, that's numbers equal to. Now there are a couple of ways that I can declare the array. Like I can just say new int, and then here I must specify the size. Let's say 10. So it will create me an array of 10 elements, which will be blank array. So it creates an array of 10, and this should be blank. Actually, should we create a blank array of 10 elements? This is one option. The other option is, let me comment this out, that I want to assign the values. So I can just straight away open a curly brace, and I can just say some numbers, whatever the numbers are, and I just added some numbers here. So how many items I have? Because I'm running the loop, how many times? 10 times. So 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. Right, so I'm running it actually more than that time. So it's only 10 items are sufficient now. So this was one way to run a loop. Now I'm going to run the loop in another way to display all the items from the array. So for that, I can just say int I'm not deleting my previous code here, because if somebody wants to look at it, refer to this so they can have a look. This was just to run a loop to print the index values. But this one, I am running a loop to print all these elements of the array. So for that purpose, let me put this together. So this is array, and for that, I just run a loop here for int I equal to 0, I is less than, let's say 10, I plus plus. And I'm just going to print here, let's say the value, okay, I, which is the location of that index array, because all the items are stored by the 0 index. So this is 0 index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I want to print the index here. Why don't I use the other option, $, let's say this one, and let's put here, what is that, I, index has value, this one, and in that, this is called string interpolation that I'm using now. It's a short for the concatenation. Value is, what is the value here? What is the name of the array? Number. Okay, and then I can put here I. Right. So what I'm trying to print now, I'm printing the index location of each element, which is I, and this index has a value, okay, and that value is number I. So in the first loop, what is the index location? 0. And what will be the item printed here? That time the item printed will be number 0. So when we say number 0, that is actually referring to 3. And when in the next loop, the index value will be 1. So this 0 will change to 1 as well. So in the number array, one location is 4. So in the next loop, it will be 2. So it will print 5. Third element. In the next one, it will be 3. So it will print the fourth element, which is 2. and so on. Yeah. So this is all working by index location here, and the index location is I. Right. So let's print this one now. Let me run this now, and hopefully it will print all the values for me from this array. Yeah, you can see now when you compare it with your elements. See that all items are printed. We're going to cover arrays in more detail in the future sessions, but at the moment all I want to demonstrate here how the for loop works and how the for each loop works, right? So it's not an array specific session, but it's just a basic understanding how arrays work. You just give it a type like char, integer, float, string. You can give it a name and then you can assign the values. So if they are numbers, they don't need to be quoted. But if they are characters, it should be single quotes, all the values. If it is a string, then all should be in double quotes. So this is my array items, and I just run a simple for loop, and I print all the items here by the index locations. Now, if I'm using the for each loop, that's a lot simple to use. So for that, let me write something here so distinguish it. Printing. Let me put a /n for extra space. So printing above values using for each loop. Right. So let's do this. So for that, I'm going to use a for each loop, and for that for each. Right, so for each, look, it even helps you completing it. I in numbers. Let me write and in numbers. Okay, I'm going to explain this now in a second. Okay, so I'm printing n. So how does it work? This number is the name of your array. Int is the type of the data. If it was char, it has to be char. If it is a class, it will be class. If it is in float or char, it has to be accordingly changed. What is n? N is like a pointer. It's a temporary variable. What it does, it goes to the collection, get in the first loop, get the first item and print it. In the next loop, it go to the next item, store it in n, print it. In the third loop, it go and get 5, store it in n temporarily and print it. And in the next loop, it replace 5 with 2, and then 2 is printed and so on. When it reaches 0, it prints the last item and automatically it terminates when it can't find anything further than 0. So it's quite intelligent. It just prints all the items in a collection that you specified in this loop. So this is the way it works. Simply for each int n in number, that n, I, x, y, z, whatever you want to call it, it will go to this collection, grab the item one by one and print it. It's very simple. So let's run these both again now. One is for loop, one is for each loop. So this is the for loop. For that we have written this code, as you can see here from line number 14, 15 to 18. We just go through one by one index. So the for loop is getting me the index as well as the value. And in the for each loop value, it can only get me the value, not an index, because the for each loop does not work by index. It works by values. It doesn't have index. You can give it an index. There's a way around this, but that's not like a built-in method to grab an index of these items. So this is the difference between for loop and for each loop in C#. Based on this, let me give you a small task. So if you understood these two loops, which I demonstrated from that code, can you please create an array of type strings and stores 5 to 10 employees' names in it? Okay, and then use these two loops, for loop and for each loop, to retrieve those elements from the array. Once you are done with this, please write your code in the chat. Thank you.